not to sound morbid, but when there's a death, there's a little smile on my face, and that smile is like, I say to myself, they know now, you know, they know now that they've understood now. There are exercises that, as an individual, you can do, which will prepare you for the experience that your consciousness, your awareness, the part of you which you refer to as the you. There's exercises that you can do which will show you that that particular part of you can exist outside of the body whilst you are alive. I mean,
Yes.
it happens every time you go to sleep and dream, but some people might not believe that.
Welcome to love, welcome to peace, welcome to our community. Be who you are, let your light shine. We're so much more when we unite.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, and good day to you wherever you are in the world at this very moment. Thank you for tuning in and listening and giving yourself permission to be transformed. It is all about tuning in, listening, and when you do, you will be transformed. Welcome to another episode of Being You, episode 25, The Journey Back to Yourself. I am Ade. I am your beingness artist. I am also your transformational agent artist. So whatever you're going through and growing through, I am here for you, to support you, to assist you in transforming it. Being You is about the journey back to yourself, the capital S self. It's about having conversations that allows you to really take a good look at yourself. How do you see yourself? How do you see yourself in the world? How do you see the world? What are some of the beliefs that you're holding that you need to release and let go of? Is the life you're living, is it based on your own intention, or is it aligned with your heart desires? Or are you living the life you're living right now because that's what you were told to do, that's what your parents told you to do, that's what society told you to do, or maybe you're doing it because you were told that's where the money's at. And we need money now. We got to leave. We got to live. We got to have money. We got to have money, and you're doing it. And if you're doing it and it's working for you, perfect. But if you're living that kind of life and you're unhappy, you may need to ask different questions. Well, my intention, my desire, my intent is that the conversations I have on this podcast inspires the best in you so that you can ask yourself deeper questions and live your life intentionally, so that when it's time to move on to the next adventure, when you're ready to let go of your physical body, you can say, "Woo, that was awesome. Goodbye. I'm out." Well, today is a continuation of the conversation that we were having last week. I had my dear brother friend, Kevin, join us, and we're continuing the conversation. So it's two African brothers getting together and sharing their spiritual journey. Just in case you missed last week's episode, I invite you and I suggest that you go back and listen to part 1 first. But you don't have to, because truth is truth. But if you do want to listen to this episode first and later go back, do it. And if not, don't. But I want to read a little bit about Kevin. Kevin he's an author, and he's written the Pocket Book of Little Big Things, Monsoon Diaries, and African in India. I love that. And then a book called Asensabe. Yeah, I got it right this time. Kevin Koranteng Cheeseman was born in Ghana. He grew up there until 1995, when he moved to London to live with his mother. He spent a large part of his working life as an engineer at Ford. And then he decided, I want to try the self-employment route. Let me see if I can employ myself and sustain myself. Well, he hasn't looked back since. So I think he's doing the right thing. His dream is to create the Pack Back Society to provide backpacking scholarship as a way for individuals to delve into the self and discover spirit in their own way. That for me, just even reading that lights me up. You can find out more by going to his website. It is Kevin K. Cheeseman.com. Kevin K. Cheeseman.com. Kevin, welcome back to Being You.
Addy, thanks for having me. That's a nice intro. Thank you.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. We were having a great conversation last week, and towards the end of the episode, you were getting riled up. You were getting there. I was like, ooh, this brother's getting charged up now. So we had to do part two. And for the listeners, last week we talked about Kevin's name, what it means, and the story behind it. So again, check it out. We also talked about his journey of just literally dropping everything in UK and traveling to India, not knowing anybody there, not even knowing why he was going there, but something was calling him. And we released the show at the point where we were talking about spirituality, or particularly African spirituality, or spirituality from the African perspective, as well as how the Western world judges some of the things that come out of Africa. I put it that way. Some of the things that come out of Africa, that continent, and particularly our tradition. My heritage is Nigerian, and Kevin's is Ghanaian, but there's a lot of similarities. One thing that we have sort of experienced in our own unique ways is experiencing how our tradition, our spiritual way of being is demonized as evil, and not only demonized by the West, by the Europeans, as well, and those of us who live in the country, because for whatever reason. So we can pick up our conversation from there, Kevin. You may have had some reflections or some things that you thought, yeah, I wanted to say, but I didn't say. And I know that you have some questions for me. So
Yeah.
I'm just going to roll over to you as if we're sitting in a cafe and we're just sharing. It's not even, I'm not interviewing you. We're just having a conversation. So over to you, my brother.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. I think, just picking up on the last point about how certain African spirituality is seen on the continent, just sticking with that. I think really a lot of it is because some of the practices that we see on the continent are being done by people who don't really understand the spiritual journey. You know, it's doing animal sacrifice this, and I'm going to get you lots of money that, and so it's I think that group, they don't really, again, is very surface. They don't really understand what African spirituality was all about, and it's not their fault. It's not anyone's fault. I mean, the issue is that it's been so long since, as a people, we practiced our own spiritual undertakings, that a lot of that stuff is forgotten. From before the Bible came to to now, it's a long time. So I think it's just people that really don't know what what they're doing.
Right. You took me somewhere, not intentionally, but the things you said just had me really think. So let's talk about that. Yeah, we're really going deep today. Let's talk about African. Let's talk about sacrificing animals, right? And if we look at it in a sort of neutral way, it is what it is. It's just animal sacrifice, right? Now, I don't know the origin of that. And I think it's kind of like we all have different cultures, different traditions, different practices, that when we practice our way of being, our life, the things that we've learned, the way we do it, the way we know to do it in our own community. And I'm not just talking about Africans, I'm talking about people. Let's just say in a family unit, that everybody has their own rules. Every family unit has its own rule of what you do, where you put your underwear, where you put your plates, where you put your whatever, when you wash it, just the things when you clean the house, where you must hang your coat. Everybody has different things that they abide by. In that family unit, their rules, it works for them for the most part. Let's just assume that it works for them, and everybody knows this is where you put your shoes, this is where you put your jacket, this is where you put your underwear, this is where you put your shirt, which is where you put dirty clothes. Now, somebody else can come into that family unit and say, wow, that's where they put their coat? And why did they put their dirty washings over there? That doesn't make sense. And they could even say to the people, that the people in the house can say, well, no, there's nothing wrong with it. That's perfect because it's close to the washing machine and we can just take it out and put it in there. And the what would I call it? The visitor can then say, yes, but if you put your dirty clothes over here and have a good reason, a good argument for they could put it somewhere else, it could actually make sense.
Yeah.
Now, somebody in the family could start judging the way they used to be, can say, wow, we're so backwards. We had our dirty clothes next to the washing machine in the kitchen. And yeah, now I'm glad this visitor came over to tell us that it's best to just put it in the bathroom. So when you go and take your shower, you can just take it off. You understand what I'm saying here? So I'm laying that as a foundation. So going back to animal sacrifice, maybe when it started, however it started, we don't know. Maybe it was just something that was a sacred act. And in order to shift energy, there's got to be a sacrifice. If we want to be different, we've got to sacrifice our old self. The old self has to die in order to be new. Now, okay, so let me keep going because I'm actually feeling this as we're talking.
Go for it.
So, what if animal sacrifice was part of a practice that was done in a sacred kind of way that aligned or worked for the people of that time? And then over the years, to go back to what you're saying about people not knowing what they're doing, it's like maybe somebody observed their grandfather do that thing without really understanding fully why they do it, without fully understanding that there's a sacred way of doing the sacrificing the animal, without fully understanding the reason for doing it. But they saw their grandfather do it and they think they know they're called to carry the legacy. So they just say, oh yeah, we're going to have animal sacrifice, right? And maybe I'm playing around here. Maybe they didn't get the proper initiation. And so part of their process is learning, okay, if you want money, if someone wants money, you sacrifice an animal, and then greed creeps in because the way they're thinking about it. Now, all of that is still fine in isolation. In that country, wherever it is, it could be, that's what we do. However, a visitor comes who normally would have a pet in the house, an animal in the house, and say, what are you doing? You should never do that. That's just wrong. But then they do a good job to convince the people who have a way of life, a tradition, a culture that's worked for them. Now they start questioning. It becomes evil. Now, what I'm saying is I'm not advocating for it or against it, but really just expanding for you listeners is how we look at things. Like, you could be doing something that really works for you, and then somebody else tells you should be doing another way, and then you might end up judging yourself for the way you used to do it. Or maybe the visitor, is now judging you for the way you did what you did. Now, I also understand that part of the things that I've heard of, that's the best way for me to put it, when people are using the spiritual practice, the rituals, some of it comes from a place of lack. Some of it comes from a place of misusing power.
Mm.
So then there's judgment of that. I mean, because if you think about it, if you're talking about African spirituality, you're talking about spirituality, you're talking about Islam, any religion, you can see where they took things overboard and they get dogmatic. They become
Yeah.
fundamental about it. They become a fundamentalist about it. And they're just like, this is the way it is. And if you don't do it this way because this is what God wants, I'm going to make sure you go to hell or I'm going to kill you in the name of Allah. Now, I'm going to stop there because I know I went on a long drive and it's something I actually never thought of because I said I was going to stop. I have a sort of feeling to animal sacrifice. I mean, my father is Muslim and during Ramadan, they kill rams. So I was sort of used to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now I'm not. I've been gone for such a long time. And the last time my dad was the last Ramadan, and they were doing the regular sacrifice of the ram, and he was trying to show it to us. I did not want to look because I've been gone from it from so far. It's like, oh, I can't look at that. So
Mm.
I think part of the corruption, the misunderstanding from my perspective, people who live in the continent and the Westerners, it's just this misunderstanding. So okay,
Mm.
let me stop because I went on a roll there. I
No,
just caught that.
I think it's yeah. It is really about misunderstanding and perceptions, and it's not just in let's say African rituals and those sort of things. It's global. You know, in a lot of religions, lots of rituals and actions that are taken are empty in many ways by the people that take those actions now. And bringing it kind of back to being you, this is why it's important to be able to say, well, hang on a second, what do I think about this thing? What do I feel about this? What is my take on this?
Mhm.
Not to just do things because just because, but to question it. And then that's how you start the journey back to yourself and your own thinking and your own perceptions and ideas about things. And I
Mm.
think kind of with this spiritual journey from it's different for everybody, but for me it's really a journey back to self, a journey back to union with yourself. And by self I mean not your body, not your mind, not your thoughts, but the observer of those thoughts. That's the unchanging you, and it's getting back to that. And you can't really get back to that. Well, you can, but it might take you a long time. But a quick way is to start asking questions of things that you see and how you perceive them, and
Mm.
whether or not you agree with them, or whether or not you think it can be done a different way, and why. And that's kind of self-analysis and questioning to get yourself back to yourself, right?
Yeah, it is. It
And
is. And go ahead.
sorry, actually, this brings me back to something that we were talking about earlier. And sometimes some of that thinking can change, and you mentioned that
Yes.
you're thinking differently now about your spirituality, and I wanted to kind of get a bit more into that. So this was kind of before we started recording, and
Yes.
those thoughts can change. So I think it would be quite good to get into how you're starting to think differently about your spirituality.
Oh, certainly. It's funny because I know thinking about when I said it and you were quiet, you're like, change your spiritual how? You got very curious, like, oh, tell me more about that. You
Yeah.
know, I went out this morning and the way back, I was really, really thinking and feeling about this. We it's kind of like some of what you were saying last week. It's like we can get a concept intellectually, but it's important for, particularly when we're talking about spiritual principles, universal spiritual principles, that they be embodied.
Mm.
It's good, intellectual spirituality is fine for a little while, but if you really want to make a shift, if you want to make changes in your life, you got to embody it. You got to really understand the fundamental truth about you. So where I'm at is, how do I put this? So it's like, if we are spiritual beings, which I believe we are, I feel it in my core, and every thought is creative. Everything begins with a thought.
Mm.
Everything that I see started with a thought. Anything that I want starts with a thought. Then, if I want, need, or desire something, it is important be to remind myself that I got to go back to the beginning. I've got to allow myself to have a big bang experience, as we said in part one. Every
Mm.
time we catch a new thought, that's a big bang. Because when you catch a new thought and you have an aha moment, you create new worlds because you start to see things differently. Like, oh my God, look at that. So for me now is I saw how there are places where I use spiritual understanding, spiritual awareness, and I'm looking at it to change what is already manifested.
Mm.
What I'm recognizing is if I want a different experience, I need to keep my attention on the formless. I need to keep my attention on where creation starts. So if I want something to change, be it a relationship or a thing, I need to hold a vision of what I want to see. I need to capture what that feels like to have the different experience. And I need to, whenever I find like, oh, maybe I need a new car, I want a new car. Rather than saying, oh, I don't know if I'm ever going to have enough money to get the car. Well, how am I going to maintain it? Is insurance going to be too expensive? What color do I want? I don't know. To just go back to what it would feel like to have the car. And whenever my mind is going through the lack of it, I come back to what it feels like because that's the point of creation.
Yeah.
So when I say I'm changing how I'm living the spiritual path, is investing more of my energy, my time into the feeling of the thing that I desire, of the
Mm.
experience that I want to live, rather than keep praying, judging,
Yeah.
analyzing from what I'm seeing with my physical eyes.
Yeah.
So it's not that I haven't been doing it, but I can say I haven't been doing it consistently. And so I catch the feeling and then I'm hoping it's going to happen. And then I look around what I'm seeing with my physical eyes. If it's not here yet, it's not here yet. Well, maybe there's something wrong with me. Maybe I don't understand the spiritual principles. No, 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 no. Go back to the feelings because everything that I want, everything that I desire is all about knowing that I'm going to feel good when I have it.
Mm.
And I don't have to wait to feel good. Be it a relationship. If I want to be in a relationship, I don't have to wait to be in a relationship to feel love, to
Mm.
feel loved. I know what love feels like. I know what it's like to be loved. I am stepping to a place where I am no longer concerning myself if the love is coming because someone else is in my life or not.
Yeah.
If it's use the car again, if it's the car, I don't have to convince myself. I don't even have to judge the car that I have and put it down and say, I hate this car. I don't like this car. It's too old. I need to just disconnect from that and just stay in the feeling, be the love, be the joy, be the happiness, be abundant, be abundance, be the feeling, and just get drunk on it.
Yes. Nice. Nice. And it's quite. That's the work, I guess. The on this spiritual journey, for example, so speaking from experience, we start off. Some of us start off with seeing that manifestation is outside of us, and then
Yes.
if and then eventually we learn that okay, it's in our thoughts. And I'd say for most of us, that's the stage that we are now. And then
Hmm.
from that stage, you go to, oh, okay, it's happening through me. And then from happening through me, you go to is happening as me. And I find that
Yes.
uh, a lot of us really, myself included, really get stuck on, not get stuck, but really where we are now is the second point, which is, okay, is my thoughts. And that becomes the work now and what we were saying last week is about the mechanics. We're at the stage where we're perfecting the mechanics. So we're still young in this. And so, for example, for me, I I can put myself into the feeling of having or being the thing that I want to manifest, but not all of the time. So for in the morning and the evening, I'm in that space really nicely. But during the daytime, when things are happening, and let's say the shit's hitting the fan, that goes out the
Mm,
window, and I go back to the external thing. And I'm finding that really the bulk of my spiritual work now is what you were saying, is to pull myself back into the state of being where you have received the thing, and you pull up the feeling of having the thing. And that's really the bulk of the work. And I'm not saying I'm an expert, no way, no way. But that's where I find myself really having to putting the hours, the work to get into that state all of the time, because it can be easy to fall out of it when things are not happening. And like you say, sometimes you start doubting, right? You're like, oh, am I doing this right? And it's, I think, really this stage is the stage of going from conceptual awareness into experience. And that can be the toughest climb, I find. So one of the things I'm doing is not to try to beat myself up too much about not being and not feeling the thing, because sometimes I'm not getting what I want for whatever reason, and I'm depressed about it. And it's also good to just let that depression pass, and eventually you realize that, okay, you are somebody who was observing that depression, so that depression is not actually you. It's just something that the mind is doing, and you are not the mind. And then once you're in this kind of mind frame, then you can step into the feeling and the anticipating of having the thing, and enjoying that feeling, which is the creative impulse to make the thing happen. But yeah, I thought I'd fit that in there, because that's, for me, that's been the hardest bit, and it still is the hardest bit, to make that second nature.
yeah, yeah. And I think it, it's important. I like what you said there, not to beat yourself up. It's important for us to be aware when we're beating ourselves up,
Yeah.
because we are creating, right?
Mm.
So if we're creating or recreating, true creation is there's nothing like it before. Even if you're adapting something that's been created before, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or even if you're manufacturing, let's just use a car, or you're in a factory and you're manufacturing something, you were working as an engineer, you may be using some kind of blueprint or prototype or whatever, but in that moment, anything can happen.
Yeah.
So if there is a mistake, yes, we can have an intellectual understanding that if I had used a spanner instead of a screwdriver, that would have been easier.
Mm.
Okay, for whatever reason, at the moment that picked up the spanner instead of a screwdriver, I thought that was the thing to do.
Mm.
See, we as human beings, it's almost like we were injected with this beat yourself up serum. Like
Yeah.
we just can't wait to be hard on ourselves, and I think part of that is because we were taught, we've allowed ourselves to accept the truth that we're not enough. So there's a lot of judgment. So when we make a mistake, we're quick to judge ourselves. We're quick to beat ourselves up, because even moments when we forget to be it. I love what you said earlier. I mean, the steps. It's like, yes, that's it right there. You get to a point where it's happening as me. And in moments when I'm not thinking that it's happening as me, because of the work that's done it before that I've been doing, I will be nudged back to remembering. Oh, wait a minute. It's when we forget,
Mm.
we go into maybe jealousy, anger, upset, frustration, overwhelmment. So we spiral down because, one, maybe we don't know or we've forgotten. But even that spiraling down and that overwhelmment feels so bad enough that it causes us to look for another way out.
Yeah.
So for me, it's like, I think it's important sometimes, even when we are spiraling and we're frustrated and we're mad and we're angry, to know in that moment we are seeking another path, and then say, okay, this is pissing the hell out of me. I'm pissed off. However, I know there's an answer, because the spiritual path is it's You've got to practice it. It's a spiritual
Yeah, you
practice.
have to.
You've
You really
got to put it into action, or
have.
else it means nothing,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think, I guess that's what many people would call the work. That's the
Yes.
because we're, like I said, we're babies in this still, right? And so we've got to do it until it becomes second nature. As I say, is the reason people go and live in caves for years to meditate and to put it into practice until it becomes second nature. That's how deep
Hmm.
the forgetfulness is. That to get back to ourselves, we need to practice really,
Yeah.
and yeah, that's the work.
And there are a lot of things around us, not just on through media, social media, newspaper, or whatever, neighbors. There's a lot of things within us, around us, that cause us to forget.
Yes, of
There's a
course.
lot of things that we've been told that if you do it this way, it's gonna work. No pain, no gain. If you don't work hard, you can't succeed. That's
Yes.
okay. I want to say that's rubbish, but that's somebody else's truth. It doesn't
Exactly.
have to be true for all of us.
Exactly.
I don't even spend 1 second thinking about growing my hair. Well, no, that's not true. I do think about growing my hair sometimes, but I used to have locks. I cut it off, and part of the time when I cut it off, it was because it was time. But there was also part of it that was the part of my hair doing some things. And I'm like, okay, you're gonna have to go. But every now and then, I do think, what can I do to get the strength back? But what I'm saying is, for the most part, we don't think about growing ourselves, how to grow new cells, to regenerate ourselves. It's happening without my conscious awareness, without our conscious awareness. So for me, my new thought, my new way of being is aligned more with this divine intelligence that knows exactly what I need even before I can think about it. And by the time I'm thinking about what I need, that's already a delayed process because the
Yes.
thought came after the impulse.
Yeah.
It takes me some time. And so for me, I feel like this, it's navigating this thing called life in a sort of playful manner.
Yeah.
And it does ask of us to be to unlearn some things.
Definitely. Definitely. And for me, in my experience, this that I find there's a lot to unlearn. A
Yes.
lot, which can take years, really. And like we were saying last time,
Lifetimes.
yeah, oh yeah, really, yeah. Like sometimes you think you've worked something out, and then you haven't because
Right.
there's a deeper. But one of the things that I've picked up recently on this journey is that we can end up having a lot of kind of beliefs that we're trying to uproot. It's an infinite Mary Poppins bag of things we're trying to uproot in order to meet ourselves. And I've been thinking recently, perhaps all of those issues or all of those things we're trying to uproot boil down to two things, really. I think, and the first one, the biggest one I find, is our perception of death, what we think death is. I think a lot of the actions we take and a lot of the resistances we have in the world, we're trying to protect ourselves in some way, right?
Hmm.
All of our
Hmm.
behaviors and all of our reactions to what people do, say, etc. That you can boil it back down to us trying to protect ourselves because we don't want to die. And so I
Yes.
think one of the most important things on this journey back to self, on this spiritual journey, is to really contemplate for you what you think death is and what it actually means for you, rather than kind of taking what another person says. Because I think, and I really like this. I'm going to paraphrase Plato here, right? And it goes something like, humanity would be better served to educate their children to fear slavery more than they fear death. Because the thing that allows us to be enslaved in so many different ways, mentally, physically, the average family is 80 to 90 hours a week working somewhere just so that they can survive to do the same thing the next day. And because, well, if you don't have this, then you're not going to have a place to live. You don't have a place to live, you're in the street. You can reduce it all back down to death. So what is death? If you can really have your own understanding of death, which is that it's not real, what can enslave you, And I think for the spiritual journey, the first thing really is to do some contemplation on death, and not fear it so much, and that's one of the things I've been working on for a few years now, really. And there are ways that you can find out um, about death. There's death cafes and all sorts of things, but also your own internal work. And this is something I mentioned before, really. And I want to ask you your opinion on what you think death is. Before I bring this up, actually, just because I've been talking for a little while. But yeah, I think, how have you come to kind of contemplate death, and what have you decided about it, and how has it shaped who you are and what you do now?
I'm smiling. It's like, I was saying earlier about, let's just imagine that we're in a cafe, right? So as you talk about death and fear of death, I'm smiling as if I'm biting on a pastry that tastes so good. And it's like, yeah, I feel you. So my thoughts, my concepts about death, and it's ironic or not, or interesting that we're talking about death when during a time where there's a collective grieving going on. Kobe Bryant,
Yeah.
who passed away this past Sunday, January 26th. And I remember when I heard about it. It's funny because I actually heard about somebody else making their transition. That's what I call it. Passed away. I know, but I don't know her. Is Ricky Byers. And her mother, Ricky Byers, is she's a New Thought artist, a powerful sister, beautiful sister, and her mother is sort of part of Ricky's ministry, if you will. And so a lot of us who follow Michael Bernard Beckwith, Agape International Spiritual Center, we know Mama Byers, and that's Ricky's mother. So I heard that she made her transition on Sunday. No, I found out on Sunday that she had made her transition a few days before on Sunday. Anyway, a few days before. That's what I'm trying to say. And then not long after that, I found out that Kobe had made his transition with his daughter and 8 or 9 different people, or 7 other people. The number keeps changing. And I noticed that I can't even say I have words for what I was feeling. But when I was able to kind of check in with myself and say, what am I feeling? I think I was more numb.
Okay.
I don't know if I was shocked. And there were things I wanted to do that day that I couldn't do because I couldn't even think what to do. It was like, imagine there was a pile of mess. Not that the things I wanted to do were messy, but there were things I just knew if I'd come back, I went out and came back home, I would have just got to it and did it. But I couldn't think straight. And I was saying to myself, I know death is not the end, it's a continuation. It is the end of that person in the physical being, in the physical body as we know it, but there's a new beginning. So there was a part of me that was curious about how I was feeling about it. There was sadness to it. And then to hear the daughter died, and there was other people, and so I had all kind of emotions around that. And when I talked to a friend and I asked her about, she's in LA, if she's heard about Kobe. She said, yeah. She said, I said, what are your thoughts? She said, well, a life fully lived. I said, yeah. And she said, I'm over this thing called death. It's it's a trick. It's not real. And as because we were texting and I read it and I was thinking, that's true. And I said to her, I said, you know what? I believe that. But I don't feel like right now I'm experiencing this moment as that truth that I believe.
Okay.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I didn't feel like, if I really know it's not the end, it's a transformation, it's a transition.
Yeah.
If I really know, would I be feeling what I was feeling? Now, maybe, maybe not. But what I am thinking about now is if you go to an airport, right,
Yeah.
and a loved one is traveling. I know I've had that experience, me traveling or a loved one traveling, and they're going for a long time. There's emotions. You're kind of sad. There's tears that they're leaving, and you won't see them for another year, 2 years. They're going to another country. And now, as I talk to you, I'm wondering if what, as a society, to honor the feelings of sadness and shock and grief,
Mm.
and recognize and really just do whatever we need. Well, we don't. Nobody has to do anything. This is just my suggestion, so I'm not even telling people what to do. But but I'm going to say it like that because that's the best way I can say it. Do whatever we need to do. Here it is. Do whatever we need to do to find peace with this thing called death.
Yeah.
I believe the birth of a child is a death on one level.
Mm.
The child dies to the spiritual realm in order to be born into the physical realm.
Yeah.
That's a death. But when a child is born, we celebrate.
Yeah.
But when a child, an adult, a person dies to this world and back to the spirit realm, it becomes things that changes our lives for God knows how many years. Some people can't find joy anymore, refuse to experience joy, refuse to be happy because somebody they loved died.
Mm.
So for me, I can say that I'm on a journey and I'm learning more and more to really know in my body, to know that I know that I know that death is just a transformation, the changing, the shifting of the energy. And the spirit, we know that the spirit is always alive. We dream about our loved ones.
Mm.
So where I'm at with it, it's like, yes, I get it. That is not the end. And I would say because of my human experience and conditioning, I think there's a part of me that still sometimes think of it as the end.
Mm.
And oh my God. Now we talk about Kobe and then we start talking about Kobe and his daughter, but there's not a lot of stories about the other people that died with him.
No.
They say other people, but they talk more about him. I mean, I'm sure somebody in the world focused on the other people that died with him, but if Kobe wasn't Kobe, he won't be on the news.
Mm.
So I think there's a way that we be with death depending on who it is. Because in this moment, someone is dying right now. Since we've been talking, thousands and thousands of people have died.
Yeah.
And so many babies have been born. So this is something that's happening every day. And it's not just about physical death. There's spiritual death. There's emotional death.
Yeah.
There's mental death. Dying to the old.
Yeah.
Like, I no longer want to think that way. I no longer want to be in this relationship. I no longer want to do this job. You have to die. The old you, the one who is fed up, has to die for the new one to be birthed, to be born.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, really, and I think for me, I know what you mean, saying that you can have a conceptual awareness of death is not the end, but experientially it can be tough to feel that, right?
Yes.
And that's I guess I've been there, but I've kind of moved on a little bit now. And now, really, when not to sound morbid, but when there's a death, there's a little smile on my face, and that smile is like I say to myself, they know now, they know now that they've understood now, right? And I think to help people out a little bit, right? There are exercises that as an individual you can do which will prepare you for the experience that your consciousness, your awareness, the part of you which you refer to as the you, there's exercises that you can do which will show you that that particular part of you can exist outside of the body whilst you are alive. I mean, it
Yes.
happens every time you go to sleep and dream, but some people
Right.
might not believe that. But there are exercises through meditation that you can do which will prepare you for the understanding that okay, you can exist outside your body, and from then on, you'll gain a different perspective on what death is, and these exercises, anybody can learn them. We just need patience. They call them either out of body experiences or astral projection. The new age term for these exercises is astral projection. It's been around for a very long time. And really, it's if you Google astral projection, you can learn about it and you can do it and you can practice it. It takes some
Yes.
time, but you can do it. And that's something that has happened to me where I have a very high degree of confidence that the I, the beingness in that I am, is not attached to the body. I can exist outside of the body, and that's a very good way to really start to approach the subject of death. So
Yes.
I would really recommend that, really, and it sort of show I talk about it and how to do it in my book, The Pocket Book of Little Big Things, but really it's just meditation and get really close to sleep and stay there so that your mind is still awake but your body is falling asleep, and you'll get out of your body, and from that point on, death is not going to have a hold on you. And I think it's a really, really, and for me, I've been, growing up in Ghana, the funeral circus, and it is a circus, people waiting and this and that, and it had a real deep kind of impact on me, because it was seeing the sadness and the crying and the real wow, yeah. And then also experientially, people in my family have passed away, my father, my mother, my sister. So I've always been kind of close to death, so I've been forced to look at it really and see what it is, and really it's nothing. It's nothing. And as a people on spiritual journeys, is really, I would say, the first thing to look into to understand is yeah, is death.
Yeah, there's a lot in well, for someone like me, I often say that I listen for a living. So when I'm listening to you, like there's so many points there. You talked about, out of body experience, which I used to have so many times. As I mean, I had as many times as I have a shower. It's like
Yeah,
almost like daily.
nice.
Um, then the whole thing about how sometimes culture or people can be around death, and which made me think, I wonder if we create a society where we give ourselves permission to grieve, our reaction to death won't be as heavy and
Mm,
intense. Because I believe that when someone close to us dies, or someone who is known as celebrity dies,
mm,
part of the grieving is not just about the person who died. Part of the grieving is about unresolved grief within us too.
yeah,
The
yeah.
places that we haven't allowed ourselves to grieve.
Mm,
The fear of us maybe dying next.
mm,
The fear of maybe we were betrayed
mm,
and we never had a voice to, or space or place to express that because we didn't want to appear weak. Maybe we are trying to be strong for our siblings or be strong for our children, be strong for the family. So if we become, or as we become or create a society where we welcome grief,
yeah,
and we give space and create space for people to grieve without saying it's going to be all right, they're in a better place, all
yeah,
those things are fine, but to let people have their grief, to grieve the way they want to grieve and support them. And if I'm not the person to support the person who is grieving, to support them if they need my support, to find a way to find somebody who could support them. And I think it changes how we respond, or let me
yeah,
say react to death, and we can respond to it. So even if we feel sad, we can feel sad that we won't see them in the physical body
exactly.
anymore. And that's
Yeah,
fine.
yeah,
Feeling sad, feeling depressed is not a judgment on your spiritual nature. It's part of the human experience.
yeah, yeah,
And as you said, the more we practice, the more we come close to the human experience and have an intimate relationship. You just shared you lost your mom, your dad, you didn't lose them. They
yes,
transcended
yes,
your mom, your dad, your
exactly.
sister. That's like up front. So
Yeah.
you get to experience it in a real way. There is no concept about it. You know what you felt. You know the thought you were feeling. After a while, it's kind of like getting used to it. So the
Yeah.
out of body experience is an experience that people can experience, and I'm saying that intentionally. It's an experience you can experience to experience. Yep, intentionally to experience what death is like. You realize you're out of your body. I mean, I didn't even plan to have an out of body experience. I don't even think I knew what that was. It would just happen. My body stopped vibrating,
Yeah.
and then I feel like I'm just leaving my body and I'm just free. Oh my
Floating.
God, I am so free and floating. And there was one time I remember it happened. I came back, I sat on the couch. I think I've been working and I think I did double shift. And I sat on the couch. It was a sunny day. And it's not even about time. But when I came back to my physical body, what I recall was I remember floating, flying over the neighborhood
Mm.
and looking down, and the sun was shining, and I was feeling like, wow, this is so beautiful. I wasn't thinking, oh, this is like death. I was just in that moment enjoying that free
Yeah.
flying experience. And then after a while, I decided that I was going to come back into my body. And then I came back into my body. And then there was a part where I felt like I just dropped into my body.
Yeah.
So now there was a sort of thinking going on. And I remember thinking, you didn't have to come into your body like that. You can come in your body very gently.
Yeah.
So I went back out.
Nice.
And then I said, okay, this time I'm going to do it real slow. And I eventually came into my body. And what I remember about those times, it was almost like there were 3 layers. So there's a part of me that was floating. That's one layer, one level.
Mhm.
And then in that thoughting process, while I'm thinking I'm coming into my body, that's another layer, that's another level. Because when I wake up, what I realized was while I was having the experience, the level that I thought was my body wasn't the body.
Mm.
Because when I wake up, it's like, oh, wait. So there was some other things. Some of it I can't really fully explain or describe, but I could tell you what it felt like. And it had me recognize that there's more than just this physical body, because there was one that was flying around feeling free. And then now let's go into the body. But when I got into the body, it wasn't the physical body.
Yeah.
And I became aware of the physical body when I opened my eyes and realized I've had an out of body experience and how fun that was.
Yeah. And this is again why it's so also important to study a lot of the ancient kind of esoteric stuff. You know, if you look at the Hindu Vedic, so even the Egyptian stuff, you know, they talk about the different bodies, the astral body, the physical body, the mind body, and then it goes all the way up through the various layers. And back in the day, they learned these mechanics, so you know what's
Yes.
happening. You're not scared, you know. And
Right.
again, the spiritual path also comes with learning the mechanics of these things as well. And there's lots in, especially the much older philosophies, but even in Judaism, you know, if you look into the Kabbalah, the Tree of Life is about all these things, and that's what these scholars spent their time studying and documenting. And but then, you know, when we come across it today, we think, you know, oh, they're crazy. They don't know what they're talking about. They're worshiping this and that. They've mapped out the entirety of existence beyond the physical, and we would be best placed to really learn these things. So I give a lot of time to learn these mechanisms as well. You know, just and it's all part of the experience, really.
It
Yeah.
is. It is. And that's how we return to self, because we recognize that self is more than the self that we see in the mirror or the self that we can touch with our hands. The self that identifies with the 5 senses, that there is a deeper self. There is a part of you that's just powerful beyond measure. It is not moved by who's in the White House or Downing Street.
Yeah.
It's just it is.
It is like that.
It just is.
It-
It is what you want it to be.
And it's interesting, isn't it? How kind of like you get on this path, you know. So after all the you start with, okay, I'm a doctor, I'm a nurse, I'm a teacher, I'm a brother, I'm a this, I'm a that. Once you kind of exhaust all that, you really come down to I'm a conscious experience, I am life. And then the question is that what is this? Who is this? What is this life this that I am? You know, and then you go deeper into that you, and then that you becomes the quest. You know.
Right. Right. You get you spend most of your life trying to be somebody, and then when you start taking that inner journey, you realize you are nobody. And you're like, I'm nobody? Yes, nobody. The true you has nobody.
Yeah.
He's just it doesn't have this not it's made up it's infinite. We're part of the infinite.
Yeah.
So anyway, I
And
am very clear that you and I we could teach class, we could do, I mean, we can go on, but go ahead, go ahead.
oh yeah, but it's very no words really can explain it apart from
Yes.
saying you are nobody. But it doesn't mean you are
Mhm.
nobody. It just means you are no thing. You know, you can't. And I always find it funny when lots of people go, "Oh, but you know, why can't God show Himself or herself?" I'm like, well, if something that is not anything shows itself as
Mhm.
something, you would be like, "Oh, well, it's that thing." You know,
Right.
infinite potential that you are can be anything, and it's
Mhm.
nothing, you know. And it's not even your thoughts, you know. Because before I thought, oh yeah, okay, so I am the thinker, so I am my thoughts. And this thing happened to me one day where I kind of watched the process of how I picked a thought and then the emotions that came with it. So it was like watching an old slideshow in my mind, and it happened so quickly, but I just happened to catch what was happening. I was sitting there bored, and it looked like a slideshow just came up in my mind's eye, and I picked one slide, which was a moment in my childhood where I was
Mhm.
in trouble. And then the minute I picked that slide, all the emotions started to come like rushing in, and I was about to kind of relive that memory and then get angry about it and all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
And then I realized, wow, okay, so what just happened there? What happened there was my mind brought something up, and then I was going to take it and then build beliefs from it. But then the next question was, well, so who was observing this process that just happened?
Mhm.
And I was like,
Mhm.
okay, so I must be the observer, right? And then again, you go back to the question. So who is this observer? How do I get to be this observer? And what is it? What is it all about? And how can I live from there? And then that becomes your goal, essentially, right? That there is another aspect of you, which is, yeah, knowable but
Yeah.
unknowable, if you know what I mean.
Oh yeah, of course. You can never know yourself, and it's just it's not it's even beyond a rabbit hole idea.
Yeah,
I mean, we're part of the infinite.
yeah,
What's the end? What's the beginning of the infinite?
exactly.
We say God is the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the ending. But where's the beginning?
Yeah, yeah.
And how do we know that there's a beginning? And who was there at the beginning to say, in the beginning, God created heaven and earth? Who was there with God? Was it God telling its story?
On any right.
You know, and then what's the end? This is the end of the world. It's written. You know, the Bible already said. But what does the end look like?
Mm,
So what? At the end, does that mean there's no human being? It's just going to be God, the Father, God the Mother, God the thing?
yeah.
What does that look like? So people buy into the beginning and the end, and this is just the way it is. This is written already that this is the end. Okay, let's just go with that. So what does that mean?
What?
Does that mean you stop living? Does that mean you blame? Does that mean you judge? Does that mean you just accept things that are unacceptable?
Mm,
Does that mean you just let things be that you can make, that you bring, that you can add you influence to? And just say, well, it's written, it's written. It's like we got to challenge ourselves to think deeper,
yeah,
to go deeper.
yeah, yeah.
I know you had some questions for me that
Yes.
we didn't get to the first time, and we're almost not getting to it. But I just want to throw it over to you now. If some of those questions are still bubbling up for
Yeah,
you,
yeah. I
maybe
mean,
some.
the big one was the deaf one, just to see where you were on that, really. But
Mhm.
also, really, some of the stuff we're talking about is not your standard. You know, how do you go from a person of Yoruba background? into this. How did you get here? How did you get onto this path? I think it could be quite inspiring for lots of people to know.
Good question. The first thing I want to say is, and it may sound very like, oh, that's so far out there. He didn't even answer the question. Is my journey, my process was already active even before I knew myself.
Okay.
And I believe that who I am today is a response to that something, if you want to call it a calling, that has been calling me. Because I didn't think I was optimistic. I don't even think I used to say I'm optimistic. I think people used to say that. They would say, "You're so optimistic. Why are you so optimistic?" And then I start saying I'm optimistic. I was just saying what I saw in the world. My mom was Christian, and life never ends. So I would see she's no longer in the physical body. So I say my mom practiced Christianity, and my dad is Muslim.
Mm.
There was no issue in the house, not that I was aware of. Issue with dad being Muslim, mom being Christian. What I know is mom was always praying every morning. She doesn't talk to us until she finishes her prayer, read her Bible. And even when we try and talk to her, getting ready for school, and we say, "Mom, where's the uniform?" I put it in there and, and be pointed. She's not going to open her mouth. And we're like, over here, it's like, like, what is going on here? Woman, speak to us. and I sort of became that in a way. I don't like talking to people before I do my spiritual work. I mean, I'm not so much rigid about that. I will talk, but I don't go into a long conversation about things that are happening. I keep it short if it happens that I have to talk. So sometimes I have said that I think growing up in a family where my mom was Christian, my dad is Muslim, gave me a broader perspective. Maybe it's by design. Maybe that's my design, to be able to come from a place where I could be raised by two people who have different spiritual, religious beliefs.
Yeah.
Now, again, because I've always listened to the call, I've always followed my inner guidance. I've always felt like there was more to life. So I'll fast forward when I moved back to UK. I was working, driving driving buses, working with London Transport in Stockwell in London. One day I was in the bathroom, and it wasn't even a conscious prayer. It was just a moment where I was talking to God. It's like, I want to do something different. I want to start over. If it means starting over again, I'm willing to do it. But I feel like I can be doing more in my life. I wasn't sad or depressed, but there was a call, there was a hunger, there was a yearning. And I just started to speak. I call it a prayer, but it is a prayer, but I didn't think I'm praying to God. I was talking to God. It's like, I want to do something different. Fast forward, few months later or a year later, I went to America for the first time, and I just felt something in being in Atlanta, Georgia. It just felt like I needed to be there. Yes, there was a culture shock. There were some things about it that I liked. There were some things that that made me very curious about that country. But there was a pull. We were there for 3 weeks. I wasn't sure if I was going to come back, but eventually I decided I was coming back to UK, and I said, if it's meant to be, I will be back. When I said, if it's meant to be, I will be back in the United States, I didn't just sit on my behind and say, well, let's just see what happens. What happens? I came back here, handed in my resignation, doing everything I needed to do, basically take action based on what was calling me up and calling me out. I was going to a country that I've only been to once for 3 weeks, but felt right. I eventually moved back to America, and let's see, when did I first go? 93. By 94, mid 94, I was introduced to a spiritual center where I was learning about this spiritual truth that we're talking about, spiritual principles, and that we're spiritual beings, and there is this thing called God. It doesn't
That's
hate
quite
or
different,
judge.
isn't it? That's quite different to, for example, what your mum or your dad would believe about spirituality. Do you see what I mean?
Oh, indeed.
Uh,
Indeed, it was so far out. Really, it's different because yeah, and you know about the Muslim religion and
yeah, yeah.
Christianity. You know how it works. And as I was going to the spiritual center, Hillside International Truth Center, the teaching was just feeding my soul. And I remember thinking, I didn't know at that point I was calling it a church.
Mm.
Now, what's the difference between a church and a spiritual center? We can talk about that another day, to me. But I was like, well, at a church, they actually having a conversation, the thoughts that I've had, they're talking about God is all loving and it doesn't matter what religion. Really? Then Iyanla Van Zandt, who is a well-known author, spiritual teacher, she will come regularly. And every time she's there, I felt inspired. She would say she's a Yoruba priestess. I had no idea what that meant. And then I would go every time she came, almost like every year she came, sometimes even twice a year to Hillside. And one day I'm like, why is she saying she's a Yoruba priestess? She's talking about she's a priestess of my culture. And I don't want anything to do with Nigerian spirituality because it's evil. But this woman's always inspiring me.
Mm.
And that's when I start to change my own mindset. Like maybe there's something about my roots, my culture, my tradition, my heritage that I need to embrace. And taking classes that I've always wanted more, always more, always more. And the thing that I'm discovering on a day-to-day basis, even up to now, is what the more is almost like the birthing or the growing of a seed,
Yeah.
just reaching towards the sun. How far can you go to reach out to the sun? The spiritual understanding, the spiritual knowledge, the spiritual awareness, the things I was learning was just my heart kept opening and there was no turning back.
Mm.
And now here's the thing. My family members, they refer to me and I think this has been happening even before, let me see. No, maybe not before I went to America. I think it's after. They refer to me in a Yoruba word. They say Oloyinbo, which means the white one or the Westerner. And they still, some of my siblings still do that. Oloyinbo, like, here he comes, Oloyinbo. And then even my father used to call me coconut. Basically, I think like white people. So there was a time when that used to bother me. Every now and then it still rubs me the wrong way, just a tad. Like, ooh, I felt that. Okay, breathe. It's okay. Nothing. It's not about me. It's their stuff. But for me, what was calling me higher, the sunlight within me, around me, that was calling me higher from moment to moment, was far more attractive than worrying about not fitting into a culture or tradition or belief system. That's a long, long story, and I hope I made it very short.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it kind of leads nicely to my next question in a way, which is, it's your beliefs now will be somewhat different to your family's beliefs, and how do they kind of take that? Is there friction, or is there acceptance?
Hmm. Is it friction acceptance? What's in between that? I, I don't know if there is friction. Well, let me say it this way. Full transparency. I tell my sister sometimes because we live together right now. And sometimes when I do when I do my radio show or podcast, I tell her, "Yep, I talked about you," and she laughs. Um, so I'm being transparent and putting a disclaimer that I'm about to talk about my younger sister here. My older sister, she's sort of kind of like, I mean, she's quiet, so I don't know what she honestly thinks. I mean, I know. Okay, this is good. I remember my younger sister telling me my older sister said, "You know how Ada is." She didn't say I am cutthroat, but she was saying like I will do the things that I said I was going to do. I'm not going to be going back and forth about, well, should you do this, should you do that? I'm going to decide what I'm going to do and move forward. And I thought it was funny
Yeah.
to hear that. Um, I think so there's four of us altogether. So I have a brother, older sister, the younger sister. My brother and I, we're sort of like on the same wavelength, the way we think. Still slightly
Okay.
different. Um, my younger sister, I feel like it's kind of like anything when you're close to someone, you know. I think when I first came back, there was I guess, the excitement to have me back in the UK, and you know, we didn't really get to spend a lot of adult years together before I came back in
Okay.
2018. So I think
Okay.
early part of 2000, because I came back 2018, December 2018. So early parts of 2019, and maybe 6 months into today, it was still sort of like, and it still is good, but it was good. But now there's a sort of way things that she would say as a pushback when I'm saying something. Her phrase is story, story. She'll say in Yoruba, like, here we go, story, which for me comes across like a judgment. Okay, he's gonna go on this long story now, or like there's something else that if I say Yoruba, Antunde, like here he goes, here he comes,
Yeah.
here. So it's almost like it comes across to me, feels to me. Let me say it that way. Feels to me like a slight judgment, even though there's a sort of love. There's love, not sort
Mm.
of. There's love there, but it's that one of those things where it's like, here we go. Now, as I say that out loud, I
Yeah.
mean, that could happen with anything, whether I'm on a spiritual path
Yeah.
or not. It could be I have a really
Yeah.
different religious beliefs, or I work in the corporate world or not. That people always have that. But because of our dynamic and the stories and the content, the context of my life and how I grew up, and it's easy for me to say, yes, it is a judgment of my way of thinking and my way of being. And then blatantly, she would say sometimes, well, people don't think like that. Well, she says Bradami, which is my brother. People don't think like
Yeah.
that. You think, she would even say, that's the white people that thinks like that. And I'm like, that's rubbish. This is not a white people way of thinking. It's like, well, but
Yeah.
Nigerians, so, and I think that there's a little charge that I feel when we're having that kind of conversation. So
Yeah.
yeah, so there's some friction, there's some
Yeah.
acceptance, and then there's whatever is in the middle.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the other way I could have asked the question is, do people think that you're going to hell because of the things you believe and things you don't believe?
I don't know. Not my family. They never said it.
Yeah.
I think the closest, yeah, like no, I don't think they think that. I think there is this belief. My sisters, they believe in, in order to see each other again when we die, we have to be Christians. And I think they pretty know
Yeah.
my mindset about that. So there's no convincing or trying to get me to think another way. But I think there's a sort of a loving acceptance. And my
Okay.
father, who is Muslim, and we have really great conversations now. And the way sometimes
Yeah.
he's fascinated by the way I think, I'm fascinated by the way he thinks, and we sort of think alike. I mean, like sometimes he will
Okay.
have a thought where I could say, if you want to put labels on it, it's like a more spiritual or more new agey metaphysical way of thinking. It doesn't matter what label we
Yeah.
put on it, but I would say an expanded view of life, kind of like, well, I don't know. And then
Yes.
sometimes, even if we go out there and we start thinking, taking thought beyond thought, he might say, let's just leave it. We don't really know. We don't really know. Only God knows. It's like he doesn't want to go
That's
there.
the fear.
He don't
That's the
want to go
fear.
there. It's like, no. Let's
Yeah.
move back. It's like, I did what you told. That's enough. That's enough. You don't want to go there.
Yeah.
Sometimes, not
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
time, but that happens when we really just go all the way out. But
Yeah.
I don't know if they think I'm going to hell, but if they do, it's got the best place to be because I'm gonna have fun. And it was like, oh, this ain't hell after all. There might be few people there actually. There might be room to grow and expand because
Yeah.
everybody's afraid to go
Exactly.
to it.
Exactly. No, no, I was just trying to highlight if there's any differences in belief because if you're brought up in a certain religion, say Christian in Africa, you're pretty you
That's
follow the
right.
book, right? And so when people go off that particular book, then there's
Yeah.
thoughts about them, right? And this is actually quite another nice little segue, because I was going to ask you if you feel a calling to share your particular path with other people on the African continent, especially, um, and how you think that would be
Hmm.
received.
Well, I have a desire. Let me feel this out and think about it and feel it. There was a time where I've just had this desire to like teach people what I know and people could change their lives. But over the journey, the journey of my life, I've sort of have a different experience now. I have a different approach. Now I'm still a teacher, I still do. I have a podcast, I have a radio show, I do workshops, I do online classes, and it's teaching that, but I'm less charged about who is, well, I never say less charged. It's like I'm doing it because I know that's the call. I'm called to be this. I'm called to teach. I'm called to share. I'm called to get people to think differently. So when I think of the continent in Africa, in Ghana, Zimbabwe, Kenya, Uganda, wherever, yes, I think for me it would, I don't know, I don't yeah, I think it's an experience that I don't have words for, because when I just allow myself to
Mm,
think about it just now, I think it would shift me in such a fundamental level. That's what I'm sensing now. To be able to share
yeah,
my journey, what I know with my people, and especially those that are willing to who are asking for a different way, or who are feeling like there's more to
yeah,
life, that it's okay to be happy, that you can be happy no matter the circumstances, or maybe feeling oppressed by maybe religion,
yeah.
by society, by the government, and somehow they know that there's something inside of them that's so strong, but they're trying to connect with it. To be able to do that on the continent with my people, oh my goodness, yes. Now I'm at a place where I'm not forcing it, I'm
Mm,
just letting it happen. um because once you force it,
yeah.
I believe forcing it just creates too much drama. But if and when the opportunity shows up, I feel like, yes, I'll be ready. And to just see a
Yeah.
sea of African faces looking back at me, oh my goodness, yes, yeah. Hmm.
I think it would be good, and yeah, it starts from, I guess, the starting point, or the fundamental point of agreement would be that, listen, the journey to God is a journey to self. So you you can also start with some self questioning, and really scrutinize your beliefs. And it's great if you come to the same conclusion that some pastor has told you the Bible says. If you come to the same conclusion after your own analysis and your own contemplation, that's excellent. That's your path. But do think about it yourself, so that
Yes.
you come to a conclusion, and then take it from there. And I think that's something I would quite, like to share with
Yeah.
people on the continent. And sometimes inside I feel that could be an uphill struggle. um, but maybe not. But like you say, there will be people out there, not just on the African continent, globally, who are feeling that what they are on the inside is very, very different to what's being shown on the outside, or is going against some sort of grain which they don't agree with, and are forcing themselves to fit to it. Yeah, and I think there's lots of people out there like that, because that's that feeling, that's the yearning. That yearning is the call. Yeah, and I think there are people out like that out on the continent who would really benefit from a different way, another way of looking at the world, of looking at who they are and who they want to be. And really, I guess the collective term for it is what we call a spiritual journey, but that encompasses mental health and all sorts of things. We just call it spiritual journey because that's the encompassing word. But really, that's if when people are feeling like that, that's the yearn, that's the call from within to turn to yourself. And I think doesn't matter which continent, people do feel like that.
Yeah, I'm with you. And the thing is, and I think it's important for people to know, or those who may be thinking that there's a judgment on Christianity or the Muslims. There isn't. Well, that's not what I'm doing. That's not what you're doing.
No.
But it's about, there is always another way. We can take anything and use it to oppress people. Even parents who love their children will do some things sometimes to oppress their children, all in the name of love.
Yeah.
So when the stories in the Bible, the stories where it's been edited, as stories of a culture that we never lived in. It's stories that was passed down. It's stories of teachers, prophets, or whatever. They weren't even alive during Jesus' time. And they're telling the story based on how they believe it was. That's fine, because life is nothing but a bunch of stories. However, when information is used to deny you of your power and you start to feel it, find your way to recognizing that there's so much more.
Exactly.
And you were saying earlier, I understand why people may not want to try a different way of thinking, especially if you've been told this almighty, this powerful being, God, will be mad at you if you connect with your feelings, if you have pleasure, if you have sex before you get married. God loves you unconditionally, but don't you dare have sex before marriage. And when you get married, then God can allow you to really enjoy, and then you're guaranteed to go to heaven. But that's fine. But if you are feeling oppressed,
Yeah.
if whatever it is, whether it's religion or not, whenever you feel oppressed by an ideology, it's time to reboot. It's time to reboot your system and say, I need something that's going to soothe me, honor me, affirm me, open me up to the good. And if people want to believe in a God that send you to hell and send you to hell, you have to decide if you're going to hell, heaven or hell. So be it. Really, I don't give a flip. So be it. We all have to have our own experience.
Yeah.
Maybe maybe previous lifetimes, I believed in that until I realized I was all sweating going into what was supposed to be hell, and I got in there and it was paradise. And now I'm saying, oh my God, it's a lie. I didn't even live life fully because I was afraid of coming to paradise. If I knew it was going to be paradise, I would have enjoyed life even more. And now I am going to live it up. Yay! Hey! Hey!
Yeah. Don't be oppressed and repressed. Don't allow yourself.
No, that's
Yeah.
Mhm.
Think for
Mhm.
yourself is the most important thing. Think for yourself.
Think for
Yeah.
yourself. There is
Because
power in you. You are encoded with spiritual
yeah.
abilities. You have permission to respond to your life the way you believe aligns with your soul. And all is well. God is good. Here's the thing. They say God is good,
Yeah.
right? Now, I often sometimes have to say, or I feel like I need to say that I quote the Christian way, if you will. Is that the best way to?
Yeah.
Let me say, Christian way, because my spiritual journey started with learning, was part of it anyway. Part of it was learning the metaphysics of the Bible,
Yeah.
and founding minister of Hillside International Truth Center. So she went from Baptist to becoming a New Thought teacher. So there's a lot of Bible reference in the teaching, and even the Christian way of being. So there's this phrase that you hear. They probably do it in the UK too, but I know, having spent most of my adult spiritual life in America,
Yeah.
there's this saying where they say God is good all the time. So the pastor would say, or the minister or whatever, God is good, and the congregation would respond all the time. And the minister would say all the time, and the congregants would say, God is good. So if God is good all the time, God is good. So there is never a time when God is not good, no matter what it looks like.
Yeah.
If God is good all the time, then God is good all the
The
time.
time. Yeah.
And that is liberating.
Exactly.
Either is or is not. So if you don't think God is good all the time, then don't say it. Because why would good want to condemn you to eternal damnation? doesn't make any logical sense, doesn't make any spiritual sense, doesn't make no sense to me. Anyway, my brother, anything you want to say before we release this conversation? And I have really, what I'll say, let me say this, really have enjoyed sharing with you and having this conversation with you. I know this is a beginning, a continuation of many more to happen in different forms.
Definitely.
But it's just been really so fulfilling and soul fulfilling. My soul is full and grateful. So thank you for your consciousness, your understanding, and just sharing your journey.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Addy. I think it's been really great, and sometimes this journey can be lonely, and it's nice when you come across another pilgrim from your neck of the woods who shares the
Yes.
same ideas, and
Yes.
it's been really enriching, and I've enjoyed it immensely, and I hope we can have some more at some point in the future. To discuss other topics, other metaphysical topics, and get deeper into other things.
I can feel it happening.
Yeah,
I feel this is, I can feel it happening indeed. I definitely can feel it. This has been very, very delicious.
it really has. It really has.
I feel expanded. I'm not the same person who started this episode. And for me, I feel like that's what it's about, embracing the moment and living it fully. So anyway, it's time to release the show. I thank you all for listening to the episode, another episode of Being You, the journey back to yourself. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and rate the podcast and leave a comment. If you have any questions for me or for Kevin, you can go to my website, lifecoachade.com, lifecoachade.com. If you have questions for Kevin, you can go to his website, kevinkcheeseman.com. Reach out, touch, bring your fears, bring your worries, bring your doubts, bring your celebration, bring your achievement. We're both here to support you. Again, thank you for tuning in. I love you. I bless you. I appreciate you. And I thank God for you. And you are listening right now to our theme song, John Stringer. You are welcome here. You can find out more about John's work by going to his website, johnstringerinc.com. johnstringerinc.com. Thank you for tuning in. Peace and blessings.
Welcome to love. Welcome to peace. Welcome to our community. Be who you are. Let your light shine. We're so much more when we unite. You are welcome here. You are welcome here.